Okay, now we're on to the next chapter, which is actually on the legislative branch. The Constitution begins with the preamble, and then Article 1 is the legislative branch. Article 2 is the executive branch. Article 3 is the judicial branch. It sets up our framework of government. We talked about that in Chapter 2. The reason the legislative branch is Article 1 is because it's the most important. It's the one that's closest to the people. You are going to vote for your representative every 2 years. We have a bicameral legislature. We have a House of Representatives every 2 years. The Senate's elected every 6 years. You could actually meet your congressperson. And quite likely you'll meet a congressperson at some point. They usually have a town hall meeting and you can go visit with them. They have a big advantage. We talked about that previously. Incumbency is a big advantage. That's why often they're reelected. Generally, people really oppose or disapprove. Polls show they disapprove of Congress. Right now, Biden has like a 40% approval rating. Congress has like 20%. But then when you ask the same people, do you like your congressperson? And they'll be like, oh yeah, they're good. And one of the reasons for that overwhelming advantage, and I've saved this, is I got this in the mail, and it's from Josh Brecheen, and he's our federal congressperson, our representative in the House of Representatives for our district, which goes all the way from Miami, Oklahoma, down to Durant, Oklahoma. Our district covers this whole rural eastern side is where Oklahoma's district is. But I got this here, and here it says Josh Brecheen, House of Representatives, and our academic bowl team made it to state for the 5th year in a row, so we're pretty proud about that. And he writes, Dear Poto Academic Bowl team, coaches, and community, we are writing to congratulate you on your recent culmination of a successful season at the State Academic Bowl Tournament. Your hard work, dedication, and preservation have paid off, and you have made your school and community proud. And then he goes on and on. Okay, the point is, when you get a letter like this, people will be like, wow, that is so nice. My congressperson is awesome. Man, all right. And they'll frame it, put it up there on the wall, and everybody gets all excited. And like, you know what? He's a pretty good guy. And then when he comes to the school and visit, and they're like, yeah, he's all right. The rest of them are a bunch of crooks, but he's a good one. That's why it's so hard to defeat an incumbent, because that's an advantage. And guess what? They don't have to pay for this. The taxpayers pay for it. And it's just so difficult because, first of all, nobody knows who you are if you're running against them. And second of all, that's the power of incumbency. So, of course, the chief responsibility of the legislative branch is to make laws. And that is the most important function. I want to stress, right now we're in a presidential election year, and there's all the focus is going to be on Trump and on Biden. Like, oh, who's going to win in that? And certainly, this is a very consequential election. Every time they say this is the most important election in history, and well, they can't all be the most important, but this one definitely, there's a lot at stake here, as we've talked about. But the more important election, perhaps, are the 435 other elections for the House of Representatives. The more important election are the approximately 30 to 35 out of the 100 of the U.S. senators that are up for re-election. Because right now, Republicans have a 4-seat majority in the House of Representatives. That's all. It's like 220 to 215. Or 216. One person had left office, so it's so razor thin. And the U.S. Senate, Democrats have a 2 Senate lead, and so and who controls that has a huge influence. So, for example, the fact that Republicans had controlled the Senate allowed them to confirm those 2 justices that are very conservative to the Supreme Court, or 3 justices actually that Trump put on the court. If that had, like it is now, where Democrats had controlled, they never could have got those appointments on the court, and it would have changed things drastically. I think you saw that when we watched the film over the Supreme Court. I don't think we've done that yet. That's later in another chapter. But yeah, so my point is the legislative branch, although the presidency has become more and more powerful in the last 100 years, the legislative branch is still where it's at least until someone comes along and assumes dictatorial control, which I hope never happens, of course. But the legislative branch is huge. The legislative branch has other functions as well. That, as part of separation of powers and checks and balances, they can oversee through legislative committees and others the presidency. So one of the chief responsibilities, of course, is impeachment of the president, which we saw twice with Trump, of course, but also investigative committees and things like that. Yeah, the legislative branch, really, of course, perhaps the most important branch of government. They're the ones that make the laws and then have a lot of oversight responsibility. So I'm going to leave it like that for this week. And as always, if you have questions, please feel free to email me.